I was staring at the notarized document in front of me, my hands trembling as I picked up the pen. Across the table at this overpriced Manhattan steakhouse, my father was grinning like he'd already won the lottery. My mother had just ordered her third glass of Dom Perignon, laughing loudly enough that other diners were starting to stare. And Mark, my pathetic excuse for an ex-boyfriend, was leaning back in his chair with that smug expression I'd once found charming, now just revolting. "Go ahead, Emily," my father said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Sign it. Transfer authority over your accounts like a good daughter. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. This is the least you can do." My mother chimed in, her words slightly slurred. "After everything we have sacrificed for you, this is nothing. 50% of your salary access to your accounts. We deserve it. We made you who you are." I looked down at the paper again, but it wasn't a bank transfer authorization. It was something else entirely. Something they hadn't bothered to read because they were too busy celebrating their imagined victory. My lips curved into the smallest smile. "You're absolutely right," I said softly, signing my name with a flourish. "This is exactly what you deserve." Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this story of standing up against toxic family manipulation, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like this. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Your support means everything. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began 3 weeks earlier. I had just been promoted to Director of Operations at Castellan Holdings, one of the most prestigious investment firms in Manhattan. At 32 years old, I was the youngest person to ever hold that position. The day they announced it, I walked out of that boardroom feeling like I was floating. 10 years of 80-hour weeks of proving myself over and over, of being the only woman in rooms full of men who doubted me at every turn. It had all been worth it. The promotion came with a substantial raise, enough that I'd finally been able to put a down payment on something I'd dreamed about since I first moved to New York at 22, a penthouse apartment in a luxury high-rise in Tribeca. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River, a chef's kitchen I'd probably never use, and most importantly a doorman and security system that made me feel safe and separate from my past. That first night in my new place, I stood in my empty living room with a bottle of champagne I'd bought just for this moment. The furniture wouldn't arrive until next week, but I didn't care. I popped the cork, letting it fly somewhere into the vast space, and poured myself a glass. I was alone, and that was exactly how I wanted it. No one to diminish this moment, no one to make it about them. Then my phone started buzzing. Text after text, rapid fire. "We know where you live now. Your doorman is very chatty. Come down to the lobby right now. We're your parents. How dare you ignore us? If you don't come down in 5 minutes, we'll make a scene. You know we will." I looked at the sender, Mum. Of course. I hadn't spoken to my parents in almost 6 months, not since the last time my father had called me at 2 a.m, demanding money for what he claimed were medical bills, but what I knew were actually gambling debts. I'd changed my number after that. Somehow they'd found the new one. I walked to my window and looked down. 23 floors below, I could just make out 2 figures in the well-lit lobby, gesticulating wildly at the security guard. My heart was pounding, but something inside me had shifted. For 10 years I'd been sending them money. For 10 years I'd been answering their calls, bailing my father out of debt, paying my mother's credit card bills. For 10 years I'd been the ATM they could withdraw from whenever they needed. Not anymore. I picked up my phone and called the front desk. "This is Ms. Castellan in the Penthouse. There are 2 people in the lobby claiming to be my parents. They are not welcome here. Please ask them to leave, and if they refuse, call the police." I hung up before the security guard could respond. My hands were shaking, but it felt good. Powerful. I watched from my window as the security guard approached my parents. Even from this height, I could see my father's reaction. He started yelling, his arms flailing. Then he did something I should have expected, but somehow still shocked me. He grabbed one of the ornamental planters near the elevator and smashed it on the marble floor. My mother pulled out her phone. Within seconds, I saw the bright light of a phone flashlight pointed at the security cameras. They were filming. Of course they were. My father was shouting into the camera, and even though I couldn't hear him, I knew exactly what he was saying. How his successful daughter had abandoned him. How he and my mother were destitute and desperate while I lived in luxury. How ungrateful and cruel I was. The security guard was on his radio, and soon 2 more guards appeared. It took all 3 of them to escort my parents out. My father was still yelling, still filming, all the way to the revolving doors. I stepped back from the window, my heart racing. I told myself it was over. They'd been removed. They couldn't get to me here. But even as I tried to convince myself I knew better, this wasn't over. This was just beginning. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face red and twisted with rage. I saw my mother's tears, the ones she could turn on like a faucet whenever she needed sympathy. I'd grown up watching them manipulate everyone around them, watching them play the victim while draining everyone dry. I'd sworn I'd never become their target. And yet, here I was, 23 floors up, and they'd still found a way to make me feel trapped. The next morning I got up at 5:30 as usual, put on my best Armani suit and headed to the office. I needed to focus on work. I had a huge meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. with potential investors from Singapore, a deal worth $40 million. If I could close this, it would cement my position as director and prove to everyone that promoting me had been the right choice. I arrived at Castellan Holdings at 7 a.m. 2 hours early, wanting to review every document, every projection, every possible question they might ask. I was in my office, deep in spreadsheets, when my assistant Jenna knocked on my door. She looked uncomfortable. "Emily, there's a situation." "What kind of situation?" "There are 2 people in the lobby. They say they're your parents. Security called me because your name is on a list, but these people don't have appointments and they're refusing to leave until they see you." My stomach dropped. "How did they get past the front desk?" Jenna bit her lip. "They had a building access card. An old one, apparently. It still worked." Mark. It had to be Mark. My ex-boyfriend had worked here until 6 months ago when he'd left for a competitor. We'd dated for 2 years and I'd been stupid enough to trust him. He'd had access to everything, including spare key cards. I'd reported his termination to security, but somehow he must have kept one and given it to my parents. "Call security. Have them removed immediately." "Emily, they're already in the elevator." Before I could respond, before I could do anything, my office door burst open. My father strode in like he owned the place, my mother right behind him. They were dressed in clothes that had once been nice but now looked worn and wrinkled like they'd been slept in. My father's face was flushed, and I could smell alcohol on him even from across the room. "There's our daughter," my father announced loudly. "The one who's too good for her own family." "Get out," I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "Get out now or I'm calling the police." "The police!" My mother's voice was shrill. "We're your parents. We raised you. We sacrificed everything for you." I stood up, gripping the edge of my desk. "Jenna, call security right now." But my father was already moving. He walked straight to the window wall of my office, the one that looked out onto the main floor where dozens of analysts and associates were starting their day. He banged on the glass, waving his arms. Everyone, look. This is what success looks like. My daughter, who won't even help her dying parents." "You're not dying," I said coldly. "You're drunk and desperate because you've gambled away everything you have." Again. That's when my mother moved. She crossed the office faster than I would have thought possible and slapped me. The sound cracked through the office like a gunshot. My cheek exploded in pain and I stumbled backward, catching myself on my desk. "How dare you speak to your father that way?" she screamed. "After everything we've done for you, we're destitute. We have nothing, and you live in a penthouse and work in this fancy office while we're starving." Through the window I could see people stopping, staring. Some were pulling out their phones. This was a disaster. This was exactly what my parents wanted, a public scene that would embarrass me into compliance. My father threw a stack of papers onto my desk. "Medical bills," he announced. $500,000. "That's what we owe because of my heart condition and your mother's diabetes. Bills you should be paying because we raised you. We spent our money on you, on your education, on your life. Now it's time for you to pay us back." I glanced at the papers. They looked official, hospital letterhead and everything. But I'd seen my father's forgeries before. He was good at them, good enough to fool most people. These were fake. They had to be. "Get out," I repeated. "Now." "We're not going anywhere until you write us a check," my father said. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. "In fact, we've already drawn up an agreement. You're going to transfer 50% of your salary to us every month. And we're going to need access to one of your bank accounts for emergencies." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They weren't just asking for money. They wanted control of my finances. They wanted to legally obligate me to support them. "Are you insane?" "I'm not signing anything." My mother started crying loud, theatrical sobs. See how she treats us? We're her parents, and she'd rather we die in the street." Security finally arrived, 2 large men in uniforms who looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation. But before they could do anything, my father pulled out his phone and held it up. "I'm live streaming this," he announced. "Everyone can see how my daughter treats her own parents. Everyone will know what kind of person you really are, Emily." I looked at his phone and saw the red recording light. He was on Facebook Live and the view count was already climbing. Dozens of people watching. Then hundreds. This was going viral in real time. The security guards managed to escort my parents out, but the damage was done. Within an hour, the video had been shared thousands of times. By the time my 9 a.m. meeting was supposed to start, the Singapore investors had already called to postpone. My boss, Richard Castellan himself, summoned me to his office. "Emily, I promoted you because you're brilliant at what you do," he said, his expression grave. "But this firm's reputation is built on discretion and professionalism. I'm getting calls from board members who saw that video. I'm giving you 1 week to resolve whatever is happening with your family. If this continues to be a distraction, I'll have no choice but to reconsider your position." I left his office in a daze. 1 week? 1 week to fix a lifetime of dysfunction, or I'd lose everything I'd worked for. I took a taxi home, my mind reeling. When I walked into my building, the doorman gave me a sympathetic look. Clearly he'd seen the video too. I rode the elevator up to my penthouse, wanting nothing more than to pour myself a drink and figure out my next move. But when I got to my door, something was wrong. The lock was scratched, the metal around it dented. I pushed the door open cautiously and my blood ran cold. My parents were sitting in my living room. My father was in my favourite chair, a glass of my expensive scotch in his hand. My mother was on my couch, her shoes off, eating cheese from a plate she must have found in my kitchen. They'd broken into my home. "Hello, sweetheart," my father said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Nice place you've got here. We decided to take you up on your hospitality after all." I pulled out my phone to call the police, but my father held up another piece of paper. "Before you do that, you might want to read this. It's a copy of New York's filial responsibility law. Did you know that in this state, adult children can be held legally responsible for their parents' care? We've already filed a petition. And thanks to Mark, we have documentation showing we're both disabled and that you've been neglecting us." I snatched the paper from his hand. It looked official, complete with a case number and a court date. My parents had actually filed a legal claim against me. "This is fake," I said. "You're not disabled. You're con artists." My mother stood up, her face hardening. "Disabled is a state of mind, dear. We have a doctor's note. We have bills. We have evidence. And if you try to fight this, we'll make sure everyone knows what a terrible daughter you are. We'll go to every news station in the city. We'll ruin you." My father set down his drink and pulled out his phone again. "In fact, we've got more than that. Remember when you were 17 and you told us about that party? The one where you drank too much? We've got photos. Doctored photos, of course, but they'll look real enough. Try to fight us, and those photos go to your employer, to every media outlet, to everyone you know." I felt like I was going to be sick. They were threatening to create fake, explicit photos of me and distribute them unless I complied. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was criminal extortion. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My father smiled. "I told you. 50% of your salary direct deposited into our account every month. Access to one of your bank accounts. And you sign over this apartment to us. We'll let you live here, of course, as long as you behave. You want me to give you my home?" "We want what's fair," my mother said primly. "We raised you. We made you who you are. Everything you have is because of us. It's time you paid us back." I looked around my penthouse at the life I'd built, at the success I'd earned through my own hard work. And I realised something in that moment. If I gave in now, this would never end. They would bleed me dry, take everything and still want more. I would spend the rest of my life as their victim, their ATM, their source of money and power. I took a deep breath. "Fine," I said, "but I need 2 days to get the money together to transfer the deed, all of it." "Can you give me 2 days?" My parents exchanged glances. My father shrugged. 2 days. "But if you try anything, Emily, I swear we'll destroy you." "I understand," I said, forcing my voice to sound defeated. "I'll do whatever you want." My mother actually smiled. "Good girl. I knew you'd see reason eventually." After they left, after they'd helped themselves to more of my food and alcohol, and finally gone back to whatever cheap hotel they were staying in, I sat on my couch and cried. Not because I was sad, because I was so angry I could barely think straight. But as my tears dried, something else emerged. A cold, clear resolve. I pulled out my phone and made a call to someone I'd hoped I'd never need to contact, Patricia Stone, a lawyer who specialised in family law and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Miss Stone, my name is Emily Castellan. I need your help, and I need it to be completely confidential." We met at her office at midnight. She was a woman in her 50s with steel grey hair and eyes that missed nothing. I told her everything. The break-in, the extortion, the threats, the false legal claims. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in a leather-bound book. When I finished, she looked up. "Your parents are very good at this," she said. "They've clearly done it before, but they've also made several critical mistakes." "What do you mean?" "They've committed multiple felonies, breaking and entering extortion fraud, creating false legal documents. The question is, do you want to just get rid of them, or do you want them to face consequences?" I thought about the video that was still circulating online. I thought about the investors I'd lost. I thought about Richard's ultimatum. I thought about every time I'd sent them money, every time I'd answered their midnight calls, every time I'd let them make me feel guilty for their failures. I want them in prison, I said. Ms. Stone smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Good. Then here's what we're going to do. Over the next 48 hours, I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone calculating and cold and absolutely determined. First, Ms. Stone helped me file for an emergency restraining order, but we held off on serving it. We needed evidence, and I was going to get it. I went to a security company and had them install hidden cameras throughout my apartment. Tiny lenses in the smoke detectors in the air vents in the decorative items on my shelves. Then I deactivated them remotely and waited. That evening I got a text from my father. Just checking in. Tomorrow's the deadline. Have you arranged everything? Almost done, I texted back. Meet me tomorrow night at Petrosian. 7 p.m. I'll have everything ready to sign. Petrosian was one of the most expensive restaurants in Manhattan. The kind of place where entrees started at $100 and the wine list was longer than most novels. I made a reservation for 4, telling them I'd need privacy. The next day I went through the motions at work, though I could barely concentrate. Jenna kept giving me worried looks, but I couldn't explain what I was planning. I couldn't tell anyone. At 6 p.m. I left the office and stopped by my apartment one more time. The cameras I'd had installed were recording everything, and what they'd captured over the past 2 days was damning. My parents had broken in again using a key they'd apparently had copied. The footage showed them ransacking my bedroom, going through my personal documents, and worst of all, sitting at my kitchen table while they rehearsed their plan. Once she signs everything over, my father's voice came through crystal clear on the recording. We'll wait a month and then do it again. Threaten to go to her employer if she doesn't give us more. Maybe we can get her to buy us a house. My mother laughed. She's always been stupid, just like when she was a kid. So desperate for us to love her that she'll do anything. And if she stops paying, my father asked, then we release the photos, or make up something worse. Say she abused us. Whatever it takes. I'd watched that footage 3 times with Ms. Stone, making sure every word was clear, every criminal admission captured. Then she'd sent it to the right people, the district attorney's office, the judge handling my parents' false legal claim, and several journalists she knew who specialised in exposing family exploitation cases. Now, as I walked into Petrosian at exactly 7 p.m, I was wearing a wire. Ms. Stone had insisted on it wanting to capture everything that was about to happen. I found the table I'd reserved tucked in a corner with high walls around it, perfect for a private conversation. Or a private confrontation. My parents arrived at 7:15 already tipsy. Mark was with them looking nervous. He kept glancing around like he expected something to go wrong. Smart boy! If only he weren't a complete idiot for getting involved in this. Emily, my mother said loudly, drawing attention from other diners. There's our generous daughter. They sat down and my father immediately ordered a bottle of Chateau Margaux. $2,000 a bottle. He didn't even blink. So, he said once the wine had been poured and tasted and approved, did you bring the papers? I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. Everything you asked for, I said. My mother actually clapped her hands. Good girl. See Fred. I told you she'd come around. They ordered appetizers. Oysters for my father. Caviar for my mother. Mark ordered a steak, trying to act casual but failing miserably. They ate and drank, getting louder and more confident with every course. You know, Emily, my father said a piece of bread halfway to his mouth, you should really thank us for teaching you this lesson. Family is everything. And family takes care of each other. That's right, my mother added. When we're gone, you'll be grateful we taught you about responsibility. Oh, I'm learning a lot about responsibility, I said quietly. They didn't notice my tone. They were too busy congratulating themselves, too busy enjoying their victory. When the main courses arrived, filet mignon for my father, lobster for my mother, my father raised his glass. To family, he said, and to Emily for finally understanding her place. I didn't touch my glass. Instead, I slid the envelope across the table. You should probably read that before you toast. My father's smile faltered slightly, but he picked up the envelope and opened it. As he pulled out the papers inside, I watched his face change. Confusion first, then disbelief, then a slowly dawning horror. What is this? He whispered. That, I said calmly, is a court summons for criminal trespassing, breaking and entering, extortion and fraud. There's also a copy of the emergency restraining order that was served about an hour ago. You're not allowed within 500 feet of me, my home or my workplace. And that document underneath, that's the notice that your false filial responsibility claim has been dismissed, and you've been referred to the DA for filing fraudulent legal documents. My mother grabbed the papers from my father's hands, her eyes scanning them frantically. This is fake. You're bluffing. I'm not, I said. In fact, every word you've said tonight has been recorded. Every admission, every threat, every plan you made. It's all documented. Mark pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly. I didn't know they were going to go this far, he said quickly. Emily, I swear I just gave them the access card. I didn't know. You helped them commit burglary, Mark, I said. You forged a doctor's signature on fake medical documents. You're as guilty as they are. My father stood up so fast his chair fell over. Other diners were staring now, and a manager was hurrying over. You little bitch, he snarled. We're your parents. You can't do this to us. Watch me, I said. That's when the police arrived. Ms. Stone had timed it perfectly. 4 officers in plain clothes who'd been sitting at nearby tables monitoring the situation in case things got violent. They'd heard everything, witnessed the attempted extortion firsthand. Fred and Linda Morrison, one of the officers said, pulling out handcuffs. You're under arrest for extortion, breaking and entering, and fraud. My mother started screaming. Not words, just incoherent shrieks of rage. My father tried to push past the officers and lunge at me, but they grabbed him, forcing his hands behind his back. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was the most satisfying thing I'd ever heard. Mark Henderson, another officer said, turning to my ex-boyfriend. You're also under arrest for aiding and abetting burglary and falsifying legal documents. Mark was crying now, actually crying as they cuffed him. Emily, please. I'm sorry. I was stupid. Please don't do this. I stood up, gathering my things. You helped them try to destroy my life, Mark. You helped them break into my home. You forged documents to make me look like an abusive daughter. No, I won't forgive that. As the police led all 3 of them out, my mother was still screaming, cursing me with every obscenity she could think of. Other diners had their phones out, recording everything. By tomorrow, this would be all over social media, but this time the truth would be told. This time I wouldn't be the villain. Ms. Stone appeared from wherever she'd been, watching, a satisfied expression on her face. That went well, she said. What happens now? Now we go to trial. With the evidence we have, the video footage, the recordings from tonight, and Mark's inevitable testimony when he realises how much trouble he's in, your parents are looking at significant prison time. 3 to 5 years minimum, possibly more. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt numb. They're really going to prison? Yes, and you're going to be free of them forever. The trial happened 6 weeks later. My parents hired a lawyer using money borrowed from a loan shark, confident they could win. They showed up to court in their best clothes, playing the part of injured parents forced to extreme measures by their ungrateful daughter. Their lawyer presented their case: 2 disabled elderly people driven to desperation by medical debt, abandoned by their wealthy daughter, who'd rather see them starve than share her fortune. He painted me as a cold, heartless corporate climber who'd forgotten where she came from. Then it was Ms. Stone's turn. She played the video footage from my apartment. Every word, every plan, every admission of their intention to extort me repeatedly. She presented bank statements showing my father's gambling debts, not medical bills. She brought in the loan shark he owed money to, who testified that Fred had approached her planning to use money from his daughter to pay off his losses. Then came Mark. Faced with felony charges and the possibility of years in prison, he broke. He told the jury everything. How he'd been angry when I broke up with him, how he'd wanted to hurt me. How my father had contacted him, how they'd planned the whole thing together. How he'd forged the doctor's signature on the fake medical documents. How the entire filial responsibility claim had been fabricated from the start. My mother started crying during his testimony, but these weren't her usual calculated tears. These were real tears of panic, the tears of someone who realised they'd been caught. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my head high. The prosecutor asked me to describe my relationship with my parents. They spent my entire childhood teaching me that love was transactional. I said, my voice steady. That I had to earn their affection by being useful to them. When I got my first job at 16, they took my paycheck. When I got scholarships for college, they demanded I send them money every month or they'd pull me out. When I graduated and started my career, every success I had, every promotion, every raise, they saw it as money they were entitled to. Did you ever try to cut them off? Many times. But they always found a way back. A sob story, a manufactured crisis, a threat. This last time they didn't just want money. They wanted control. They wanted to own me. The prosecutor nodded. Why did you finally decide to press charges? I looked directly at my parents sitting at the defendant's table. My mother looked away. My father stared back, defiant to the end. Because I realised that if I didn't stop them now, they would never stop on their own. They would take everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for, and it still wouldn't be enough. And I realised that I don't owe them my life just because they gave birth to me. I don't owe them my earnings just because they housed and fed me, which is the bare minimum legal requirement for parents. I don't owe them my freedom. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The judge looked at my parents with unconcealed disgust. "What you did to your daughter is reprehensible," she said. "You weaponized her love, her sense of obligation, and her fear of public shame to try to steal from her. You broke into her home. You threatened her career. You attempted to extort hundreds of thousands of dollars from her. This court will not tolerate such behavior." She sentenced my father to 4 years in prison, my mother to 3.5. Mark got 2 years for his role in the conspiracy. Additionally, they were ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my apartment and to my professional reputation. My father collapsed in the courtroom claiming a heart attack. The paramedics who arrived checked him over and determined he was fine, just panicking. They took him out on a stretcher anyway, still in handcuffs. My mother was screaming again, being physically restrained by bailiffs as they led her away. I walked out of that courthouse into a sea of reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust in my face, voices shouted questions all at once. Ms. Stone had prepared me for this, and I had just one statement to give. Family should be a source of love and support, not a weapon used to control and exploit. Blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to abuse you, manipulate you, or steal from you. To anyone out there in a similar situation, please know that you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, even if they're related to you. Especially if they're related to you. Then I put on my sunglasses and walked away, Ms. Stone beside me, leaving all of it behind. 2 days later, I was on a first-class flight to Santorini. I'd taken 2 weeks of vacation, my first real time off in years. As the plane climbed above the clouds, I opened my laptop to check my email one last time before the flight attendant told me to shut it down. There was a message from Richard Castellan. My stomach clenched, fearing the worst, but when I opened it, my eyes widened. "Emily, in light of your exemplary handling of an incredibly difficult personal situation and your grace under pressure throughout this ordeal, the board has decided to promote you to Vice President of Operations. You demonstrated more leadership and strategic thinking in these past 2 months than most people show in their entire careers. Welcome to the executive team. We'll discuss the details when you return from your well-deserved vacation." I closed the laptop and sat back in my seat, a real smile spreading across my face for the first time in months. The flight attendant came by with champagne and I took a glass. This time when I toasted to my success, I was truly alone. No parents demanding their share. No boyfriend pretending to support me while sabotaging me behind my back. Just me, my achievements, and a future that was entirely my own. As I looked out the window at the clouds below, I thought about everything that had happened. Was I sad that my parents were in prison? Not really. They'd made their choices, and those choices had consequences. They'd spent decades treating me like property, like an investment they could cash in whenever they wanted. They'd never loved me, not really. They'd loved what I could give them. But I'd learnt something invaluable through all of this. I'd learnt that you can't negotiate with people who see you as a resource instead of a person. You can't compromise with people who will always want more. You can't maintain a relationship with people who only love you when you're useful to them. My phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Stone. "Enjoy your vacation. You earned it, and for what it's worth, you did the right thing." I texted back a simple thank you and turned off my phone. For the next 2 weeks, I was unreachable. No demands, no drama, no family trying to drain me dry. Just me, the Greek islands, and the absolute freedom of knowing I'd finally truly broken free. So here's what I want to ask you. Have you ever felt like an ATM for someone in your life? Have you ever been made to feel guilty for having boundaries? Have you ever been told that family means letting people walk all over you? If so, know this: you deserve better. You deserve relationships built on mutual respect, not obligation and guilt. You deserve to keep what you've earned. You deserve peace. Don't let anyone tell you that cutting off toxic family makes you a bad person. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is to save yourself, even if it means leaving others behind. Especially if those others have been drowning you for years. If this story resonated with you, if you've been through something similar, or if you're still trying to find the courage to set boundaries, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing up against family manipulation and toxic relationships. And most importantly, leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me how you broke free, or tell me what's holding you back. This community is here to support each other. You're not alone.